Mount Sinai. We're going to be here for 10 months. 10 months of instruction at Mount Sinai. But let's take a look at chapter 19. This is, and I'll spend a lot of time here. I want to really unpack some of the theology that's really rich in chapter 19 and 20. And really, because it lays a foundation for some of the things that we're going to be seeing down the road. But I've given you this slide that talks about, let's just take a look at chapter 19, verses 1 through, down through verse 8. So in the third month, after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt. I think I have my sound on. Patrick, you were supposed to warn me. So is it on now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So we're reading in Exodus 19. On the very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai, verse 2, when they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai, they camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped in front of the mountain. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel." So, Moses, this is what you're supposed to say to Israel. Verse 4, "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians," which is all that we've just seen, right? All the previous 2 months of activity, and Yahweh as king authenticating himself against Pharaoh, who's the real king here, and all of the miracles, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So that's salvation language, being born or riding on the back of eagle's wings. Verse 5, the implications of this. "Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant," that's the way forward, "then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel." So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all of these words, underlined words, which the Lord had commanded him. In verse 8, the people respond and answer together and said, "All that Yahweh has spoken we will do." And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. It's a significant exchange here, focusing there on the last 2 verses, an exchange of words. I mean, we have a lot of words that are coming. We're going to have 10 words written on 2 tablets of stone just around the corner. Moses is going to have a permanent record of those words. But these are intimate words exchanged between the Lord through Moses and the people in response. And when we have an exchange of words, this whole, and I've given you this slide here, we're going to unpack this a little bit more. But this first part in Exodus 19, remember these fancy terms, suzerain, vassal, and that suzerain vassal idea from the ancient world, kings talking to each other. Suzerain is the superior king talking to the vassal king. And here we have God as suzerain inviting his vassal into his royal court and entering into this covenant relationship. When you have an exchange of words between 2 kings, you have the beginnings of a covenant relationship that's defined. And by exchanging words, you're also assigning your assent, your agreement. You're giving the king, "I do, I will." You know, sounds a lot like this event, the exchanging of words. I don't think it's too far away to think about Mount Sinai for Israel as in this wedding idea, this wedding ceremony, where you've got two people coming together and exchanging words, the vows, right? And giving each other, "I do, I will, for life. I'm going to be loyal to you and express my fidelity to you," in terms of a wedding idea. And I think that's what we have with Sinai. And we're going to see this is all established on a relationship of grace. We're going to unpack these. We've already seen how Yahweh, the Lord, saves Israel by grace. And then we have the beginnings here. He invites Israel into a relationship to himself by grace. Yahweh calls Israel to be totally devoted to himself, solely devoted. You're not going to have spouses. You've got one. You're in a marriage relationship. You're married to me. Israel declares her unreserved commitment to Yahweh. In response, we just saw that. And then, just around the corner, the groom shows up in all of his glory and majesty. He's going to show up on this mountain. And I love this part. I'll amplify it a little bit with some of my geekiness. I can't wait to show this slide. Appears in all of his glory. And then Yahweh declares to Israel the basic principles of covenant relationship by grace. Grace, 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 grace. You're going to hear me say that a lot in the Old Testament because most people don't think grace is in the Old Testament. You meet them on the street, you meet them in your churches, in your pews. They're convinced, somebody's convinced them that there's no grace to be found in the Old Testament. And I'm showing you that I'm building this case that the whole Mount Sinai experience, the Ten Commandments, is on the foundation of grace. Most people think that's the beginning of legalism. All started at Mount Sinai. God gave Moses a ball and chain of legalism coming off that mountain. I hear all of the old ladies in the back row, of the churches that I've grown up in, Well, we don't read our Old Testament because it's all legalism. And that's this slide. Most people think of this, right? Oh, well, if it wasn't for this guy, we'd be stuck here, Well, we're flipping this around a little bit because this is the thing that I want to make sure that we understand here is before we get into more of the text is that this idea of legalism. I'm going to revisit this a little bit because what is legalism? Remember our discussion of the cart before the horse, right? So this picture is a little bit unfair. So we've got this intimate language here in chapter 19, this exchanging of words between two willing partners of a marriage relationship, covenant agreement, happening before the Ten Commandments even enter the picture. So there's this intimate exchange. Israel's given her I do before the Ten Commandments and all of Moses' instruction that happens from this point on, which defines, well, what does I do look like for Israel? What are the implications of the I do? Well, they needed to be instructed. They're still 2 months out of Egypt. There's a lot that they still had to learn, right? So the expectation of the law was not sinless perfection, but a wholehearted obedience. And in the midst of a lot of growing up. That's what we would expect coming off the mountain. The idea of law comes from, that we have in our English translation, this comes from the Hebrew, which means to teach. To teach or instruct. If we put this gets a little complicated. Sorry, I got a little Hebrew on you. But the word Torah comes from the Hebrew verb that means to instruct. So it's really, if you think of Torah, usually we go this direction with it, right? Law. But I prefer the idea of instruction instead of law. Law, we get into the legal idea, but really what we've got more of what's going on is the instruction, stipulations, the commandments, the instructions, and all of these things that become part of Israel's experience as she moves forward. So this is the idea of instruction. So let's talk about so what happens when we put, we come back to this cart before the horse idea. What's interesting is that all of what happens in chapters 19 and 20, again, is riding on the back of the Abrahamic covenant. And we see in Israel has already been exposed to the example of Abraham in his faith, even before Israel gets to Mount Sinai. So Abraham becomes the example of what authentic faith looks like. And remember, we've talked about what I've tried to establish is the picture of authentic faith, the heart with feet attached to it. So we've got in terms of what we're looking at in Exodus 19 and 20, let's do this. I've never done this before, but I'm going to do it today. Exodus 19 is the heart. It's the I do, the exchange of words. Israel's going to have to say, I'm in this. See my hand? It's up. Let's go. Let's do this. And then the details of obedience. You've got the 10 Commandments. And then everything else becomes the Torah, the instruction that Moses gives from this point on. Of course, it's already started. We started to see the testing in the wilderness, these stipulations and hey, don't do this, do this. Gather manna for this many days and don't gather manna on this day. Don't store it up. If you do this, then this is going to happen. All of this is the beginnings of the instruction. And that's what we have with the feet. Moses is going to identify and instruct Israel. What does it look like when you've got your heart set right and you put feet attached to it, that you're going to walk. You're going to have to do something in response. There are implications of this for your life and what it looks like. And there's a lot at stake because this properly demonstrated, the nations around, you're going to get their attention. They're going to want to know what this is all about. And that's where this is going, because it's the name and the reputation of the Lord that's at stake. It's His name and reputation. Oh, thank you. Somebody said good point in my comments. All right. Well, let's keep moving ahead. So if we reverse this order, if we have feet somehow on top of the heart or get it reversed, then we've got legalism. You can't expect a bunch of half-baked pagans to follow through with the 10 Commandments unless they've given their heart first and their assent. I'm not trying to be mean with this, but we put our 10 Commandments on the front lawn of the courthouse, but what about the non-Christian walking by? We can't expect them to be obedient because they haven't had their heart changed yet. Something like that. Now, I'm not making that a political statement or anything. It's just interesting, And that's what James in the New Testament, and that's what Paul talks about. They were combating the legalism in their day in the first century church. And we looked at some of those passages before, and I've got a couple of them. James chapter 2, faith without works is dead. Remember, James talks about that. And Paul, in Galatians chapter 2, verse 15 and 16, Paul also addresses this situation. Because in the first century church, the Pharisees and the legalists were flipping the scene. They were expecting perfection out of people whose heart had not been changed. And that's legalism. And that's not the picture that we have here. Now, let's get into some of my other weird video clips. And I love this one. In getting back to Exodus 19 that we looked at, and the intimacy, I'd argue, the picture of being saved, riding on the back of eagle's wings. Just let that echo in your mind as we watch this one together.
Calm down. I'm not gonna hurt you. Sick girl. Stay still. It's okay. I'm gonna help you. Easy, easy.
think that's it's an interesting little video clip because it starts with salvation and follows the progression there in Exodus 19 on the back of eagle's wings. But it shows you once, the recognition of being saved, but then being pushed along like the boy on the water and a little nervous at first, and all of a sudden he's out on his own doing it, and then all of a sudden he's got the confidence to leap out over the side of a waterfall, and he thinks he can fly, and it's kind of like, I think the progression that we see here in the, Israel in her early stages, getting perhaps her heart and head around the reality of being saved and being rescued by the one true God of the universe. And it's Him. He's the one who saved us out of Egypt. He's the one that's providing in the wilderness. And we're finally understanding what is it? What are the implications of this for me as I move ahead? We're a nation that this is the God who has our back. So what can we do? Kind of like that. So I just think you can, by the way, you get all of these video clips for free. You can use them for your teaching. And I think this really conveys to a group of kids, you're trying to help them understand what does it mean to trust in the Lord. So I hope you use them in your future ministry if they're helpful. So there's a additional great illustration of the intimacy that I think comes out of this video clip. And I just want to use it as just a brief leaping off point with regards to intimacy. And it's this slide right here. Maybe you didn't catch it in the video clip, but there was this one point in the video where the boy is looking into the eagle's eye and he sees his own reflection. Do any of you know the phrase, apple of my eye? That idea of the apple of my eye. And it's used in different verses in the Bible. The apple of his eye. And we see it come up in like Zechariah 2. After glory he has sent me against the nations which plunder you, for he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. Keep my commandments and live, and my teachings as the apple of your eye. He found him in a desert land. This gets into the context of what we're talking about. And in the howling waste of a wilderness, he encircled him, cared for him. He guarded him as the, in this case, pupil of his eye. But it's the idea when you're the apple of the eye comes from this basic picture, because if you're really intimate with someone, you get really close, right? That's the posture of intimacy. And you look into their eye and you see your own reflection. So there's an intimacy that's being conveyed, right? And that's what it means, the apple. You're looking into the apple or the pupil of his eye. And it's just a way of conveying how special and how intimate the Lord is with his people, his faithful. All right, so that's just for free there. And there's some verses there that talk about it. So with all of this, and we're still here in Exodus 19, I just like hanging out here for some reason. But if we move ahead in chapter 19, after the initial exchange of words, remember I said that the Lord is going to reveal himself in person. He's going to show up on the mountain. And you see the language beginning in verse 18 in chapter 19. Now Mount Sinai, it happens not before that. That's right. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. Suppose it looked something like an erupting volcano or something. And I love this. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke and God answered him with thunder. The Hebrew there is the word that means voice. It's translated thunder because that's the translation committee's decision. I would like to prefer and leave that as not thunder, but voices, because it's the voice of the Lord that the people are hearing, although it sounds like thunder. And the Lord came down on Mount Sinai at the top of the mountain, and the Lord called to Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. So there's this sound of trumpets that just gets louder and louder. So this is my geek moment for the day. I think I said I'm a Drum and Bugle Corps fan, so here we go. Maybe something like that. All right, there we go. Enough of that. So he's speaking to the people, and his presence is not only heard, but it's experienced. The fullness of the experience of the presence of the Lord. They've had a little practice with this. Pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. But this presence of the Lord will become significant because it's this presence of the Lord that's going to follow Israel into the land, but it's going to be kind of warehoused in this thing called the tabernacle. And the presence of the Lord with his people is going to have implications because we're going to start talking about holiness and the need to preserve holiness. Not sinless perfection, but dealing with sin, worshiping in a certain way. All of the activity in the tabernacle is going to be kind of an extension of the fact that it's the presence of the Lord that's here with the people. And that's revolutionary, and that's not what the pagan experience has been in and around Israel. So there are implications of this idea, and the idea of being chosen. So you see the, going back to Exodus 19. So this idea in chapter 19, we go back to verses 4 and 5. I bore you on eagle's wings. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice, keep my covenant, you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you'll speak to the sons of Israel. So there's implications forward-reaching to the choice that God has made in choosing Israel to be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, and we'll talk more about this word, segulah, that idea behind a special treasure that you see there in verse 4. Well, let's talk about it right now. The segulah. You see that word that's translated different ways. My translation, my New American Standard says my own possession. Sometimes it's special treasure. I don't know how it is in your translation. But the idea is this: in the ancient world, kings would have a warehouse, you might say, a Home Depot, full of treasures. They'd have treasures, valuable things they would have had from the spoils of war, gifts from other kings, whatever. This warehouse of things. And let's just pretend that I'm an ancient king and you're on a tour, and I've invited you into my warehouse of treasures. So I'm inviting you in, and we have the thing, and I'm taking you backstage pass, and we're walking through, and I'm explaining, yes, to your right, yes, this is, I got this from the Queen of Sheba, and to your left, yes, well that's some statues from ancient China, and all of these things, and I'm waxing eloquently, and then Patrick here has the audacity to raise his hand near the end of the tour, asks me this question. He says, what, out of all of the things in this warehouse, is the most valuable thing to you? You ask that question. So I said, well, let me show you. So I take the whole tour. We go all the way back to the very end And on the last shelf on the left, third high, I go back and I reach in and I pull out something that's in the palm of my hand. And I point to that and I say to you, this is my special treasure. This is the most valuable thing. Out of all of these things, this is the most valuable. And this is what God is saying to Israel right here. This is who you are to me, the most valuable. Out of all the things on the earth that are mine, verse 5, you are my Segulah. So there's implications to the reality. Israel's waking up to their special designation. See, a kingdom of priests, holy nation. We're going to live life differently than we have ever before because of this moment. And this is what's happening, this redefinition. The implications. Israel's going to bear the name and the reputation of God, of Yahweh, the Lord, as they move forward into the land of Canaan. They're going to practice as priests through worship, through intimate knowledge of their God. It's not going to be, it should not. Well, we'll know, we'll talk about it later, but at least from this point on, God will remain as king. He'll remain as king, and it's not going to be about the political system, the political machine. God is king. And any earthly king should never get in the way of that as they move forward. So Israel is the world's first theocracy. God is king. So that's what we have. The remaining of the book of Exodus, chapters 25 through 31, there'll be a focus on the construction of this meeting place where Israel will express her theocracy. The tabernacle. It'll be a portable meeting place where Israel will deal with sin, express worship, and preserve that experience with the Lord. And they're going to be a holy nation. So as we move forward on the foundation of this idea of God's presence, as Moses instructs Israel, it's going to have implications far-reaching into every aspect and every jot and tittle of Israelite society. So let me just say this, because we've been talking about grace. Not legalism, not the dietary laws. They're going to eat differently because of the implication of God's presence. Holiness extends to how they eat differently, how they worship, how they raise their kids, the songs they sing. All of these things are all part of the comprehensive nature of what Israel is going to do, and as she expresses herself as a holy nation. So this is all moving forward. Now, implications of being chosen. I've got another video clip, I know. A lot of video clips today. But I want to throw this one at you just because I think it's really profound in terms of the implications of being chosen by God. If you've never thought about that, even in this side of the cross world, we have to not lose track of that. There's implications of this for us. Israel as a nation, of course I talk about them as a nation, but as individuals that make up that nation, they are part of the faithful remnant. And they're getting their hearts and minds around this idea as it's being presented to them. So this is a video clip, I think. What does it mean? What happens when God... How does it change your life, right? When God taps you on the shoulder.
We had planned to bring you a story tonight about a kind of prep school that prepares football players for the NFL draft and big contracts. So we're going to call an audible. We're going to switch sports tonight because we run across an absolutely amazing basketball player that we want you to see. Here's Steve Hartman.
Grace Athena High School in Rochester, New York, has a new, most unlikely hero, a special ed student by the name of Jason McElwain.
Keep it going.
Jason is the basketball team manager. For the past couple of years, he's been assisting Coach Jim Johnson, helping with whatever the team needs.
Get him motivated and water and just enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic, to say the least. Despite being born with autism, Jason's father says his son has never had a problem expressing himself at basketball games.
I was always concerned that he might get a technical and they lose a game because he, started yelling or whatever.
Let's have a hard practice tomorrow. All hour and a half, and let's get ready for Arcadia. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 2.
Because he has been so devoted to the team, for the last game of the season, Coach Johnson decided to let Jason actually suit up. not to play necessarily, just to let him feel what it's like to wear a jersey. At least that was the plan. But with 4 minutes to go in last week's game, Coach Johnson stood up and pointed to number 52, Jason McElwain. After years of fetching water and toweling off other people's sweat, Jason was actually in a game. His first shot was a 20-footer from the right baseline.
Was it close? Did you almost make it?
I just airballed it.
I'm like, just, dear God, please, let's just get one basket.
His second shot missed too, but the third was a charm. A 3-point no-doubter. And Jason wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot.
If I wasn't there to witness it, I wouldn't have believed it, you know.
You caught fire. I just caught fire. How's high as a pistol?
Jason ended up shooting 6 3-pointers. One right after the other. He had 20 points total, and each time a shot went in, his teammates and the crowd went a little crazier. Right at the buzzer, created total mayhem. Because he is autistic, Jason says he's used to feeling different, but never this different. Never this wonderful. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Rochester, New York.
Isn't that good? Anybody need Kleenex? Anybody need Kleenex? Yeah, I like, from this I leap to our New Testament expression of this whole pattern, this progression of God saving us, and then the far-reaching implications, right, of where we go with this. And in Ephesians chapter 2, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. For by grace you've been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it's a gift of God, not as a result of works, that no one should boast. Usually we stop there, right? But then, the implications. For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. See? So there's implications of this gracious activity of God saving, and then what we do in response, a loyal response. Our obedience and follow-through has feet attached to it. You're never the same when you're saved. You're going to be walking like this, and this is the true picture, both Old and New Testament. And this is what we see, but it's on the foundation of God's grace. That's the New Testament equivalent to our discussion here in Exodus 19. All right. So this was revolutionary in its day. And here's the intimate picture of the wings that are protecting in this case, not a chick, but a lamb. But it's kind of a neat picture. But we're going to, in response to this, we see the defining activity of Moses. Actually, God first. God's going to write down 10 words on 2 tablets of stone, give those tablets to Moses and say, start with these. The foundation is laid. So all of that discussion, and we haven't even talked about the 10 Commandments. So we see that in Exodus 20. And I won't read them, but you're familiar with the 10 Commandments. And then we move over to verse 20. So there's a little bit of this, we've talked about this testing idea, right? Well, here it comes in again, of all places. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of Him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. So this is the testing environment. We haven't stopped testing Israel. Israel's continuing to be tested. So this is a continuation of that which they've started in the wilderness. Test, test, test. Don't test God. The Lord tests us. And we move ahead because just like it was for Abraham, when he was tested, the fear of the Lord was authenticated in his life in Genesis chapter 22. The path ahead for Israel, as she continues to put feet to her faith, she's going to be authenticated and tested, refined. 5 steps forward, 3 steps back. That's no different than it was for Abraham. Will it be for Israel as she moves ahead as now a nation? All right? So that's important to see and understand. Now, how revolutionary was this in the context of Moses and Israel? So think now, picture yourself in the ancient world. And you wake up and you're a confused pagan. And you've picked up the newspaper or maybe a good book off the shelf. And you're wrestling with your life. You're wrestling with the reality of your existence. Maybe the why question has come up a few times. And here's a poem that a famous songwriter in your day has put down to words. And this is from a pagan. O Lord, my transgressions are many, great are my sins. O Lord, my God, transgressions are many, great are my sins. My goddess, my transgressions are many, great are my sins. O God, whom I know or do not know, my transgressions are many, great are my sins. O goddess, whom I know or don't know, my transgressions are great, great are my sins. The transgression which I have committed, indeed I don't know. The sin which I've done, I don't know. The forbidden thing which I've eaten, I don't know. Place, I don't know. The Lord, in the anger of his heart, looked at me. I know the gods are mad. The God in the rage of his heart confronted me. When the goddess was angry with me, she made me become ill. She punished me. The God whom I know or don't know has oppressed me. The goddess whom I know or don't know has placed suffering on me. And I'm constantly looking for help, and no one takes me by the hand. When I weep, they don't come to my side. May the fury of my Lord's heart, please be quieted towards me. May the God who is known be quieted toward, not known be quieted toward me. May the goddess, whoever you are out there, may your heart be quieted toward me. May the God whom I know or do not know be quieted towards me. Down here. In ignorance, I have eaten the forbidden of my God. In ignorance, I have set foot. I have set foot on that which is prohibited by my goddess. I utter laments. No one hears me. I am troubled. I am overwhelmed. I cannot see my God. Merciful one, I address to thee the prayer ever inclined to me. I kiss the feet of my goddess. I crawl before thee. And then we've got some missing lines. How long, O my goddess, whom I know or do not know? Man is dumb. He knows nothing. Mankind, everyone that exists, what does he know? Whether he is committing sin or doing good, he does not even know. O Lord, do not cast thy servant down. He is plunged into the waters of a swamp. And we move over here and finish. O God, whom I know or don't know, my transgressions are 7 times 7. Remove my transgressions. Forgive my sins. Remove my transgressions, and I'll sing your praise. May the heart, like the heart of a real mother, be quieted towards me. Like a real mother and a real father, I'm looking for one, may it be quieted towards me. Confusion in the pagan world. You see, it's interesting. It's a very vulnerable and authentic and transparent poem. But it conveys the heart of and that comes from the library of a 7th century BC library, Ashurbanipal, an Assyrian king. Kings were good at collecting things like this. And this is a real poem. That was a real song that was written and sung and circulated around at the time to convey kind of like a good Bob Dylan song, you know. People who are dealing with real feelings and emotions. I know I'm a sinner. I feel bad about it. And I know my God's angry at me because of it, but I haven't the foggiest idea what to do about it. Please tell me what I need to do. See? And so you see, in contrast to that, how revolutionary was it that one nation knows what to do and how to respond to the one God, their God, the only God. They only worship one. And they know what to do about sin. And they know how to experience blessing from that God. And they do. That's in the design. And how they raise their kids is radically different. How they worship, what they eat, how they have church. It's all radically different. And we're confused over here, but over there, that nation, they always win their battles. We don't know why. They don't have the biggest army. But their God has got their back. And I want to know more about that. I want to tell me more about that. Because over here, I'm confused and they're always at peace. They have this shalom thing going on, really, really big. And we don't have that. So there's this contrast, and this was what Israel was supposed to enter in and express. So there are implications for this. So Exodus, let's go back to Exodus 24. And there's going to be a continual affirmation, and I can't cover all of the instruction but you see that the details, the relevant details are woven into the narrative. We've got property right laws and what's called the Sabbath laws in the land, and we're going to start talking about feasts and certain things and events that Israel will come together and focus on the goodness of the Lord and all of these things. And so in chapter 24, in verses 3 through 7, then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord, all of the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice, "All the words which the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. So here's his writing, his ministry, which he could have done because he was educated. Then he arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with the 12 pillars for the 12 tribes in all of Israel. So they haven't left Sinai yet. All of this instruction is happening there. But in verse 7, he's writing these things down, this is what we call what's called the Book of the Covenant. So this, in verse 7. Down in verse 7. So these things, I'm not explaining, so verse 7, there we go. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." That last word in verse 7 is the word Shema, Hebrew word. We'll come back to that word when we get to Deuteronomy, but the Shema, the one word in Hebrew that means to hear, but it also means to obey. One word means both in Hebrew. Shema. So that's what they're saying. We hear it, and we're going to do it. That's what Israel is saying there in response. But this Book of the Covenant refers to everything that we have from the Exodus 20 all the way through Exodus 23. So this is just one example of the kind of this progression of what we think happened with regards to how the Pentateuch came to be. Moses is hearing from the Lord. He's instructing Israel. He's writing it down. He puts it in a book, and he moves on to the next volume. And he's collecting these along the way in its proto form. So just wanted to show you that a little bit. So the rest of Exodus 25, chapter 25, through all the way through Leviticus 27, really is going to focus more on this instruction and this teaching that Moses is going to unpack for Israel. They're going to be taught to be a good steward of the presence of the Lord. And it all is built on this foundation of grace. God's election, His selection of Israel. He's declaring them and He's defining them as His segulah, His special treasure. And then the follow-through will take feet. There'll be feet attached to it as they move ahead. They're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation as a result. All right, so let's take a quick 5-minute break if you need to, and we'll come back and finish our morning out here.